Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I've got a fun video for you about the dangers of marijuana, and I thought that this was a very important topic to talk about because I've been doing a lot of pro-cannabis content on my channel, not only the dispensary tour, which has an absurd amount of views now, but also videos on Delta 8, CBD, legalization, blah blah blah, because I have to use Delta 8 here in Texas for pain relief to function every day. It's now a very important topic to me. However, I and most other people inside the cannabis community present this drug as being totally harmless or good for you, devoid of any side effects. Nothing bad can possibly happen from smoking marijuana, right? They'll almost never talk about the side effects and only talk about the health benefits, a lot like I did. So if you want to learn the good things about it, you're more than welcome to go back and watch my old videos. Today we're going to focus on the bad stuff because there's no such thing as a harmless drug. There's no such thing as a drug without side effects or contraindications, and there's also no such thing as any substance on this planet that is harmless to you. Even water will kill you either from drowning in it or ruining your electrolytes if you drink too much. So let's be serious, let's be adult, and let's talk about some of the downsides of cannabis and Delta 8 and any sort of cannabinoid product use. As we move through the video today, I'll have a variety of links in the description to cite my sources, and we'll put some screenshots of these sources and studies on the screen here when we're talking about anything that's a little bit less well known about cannabis. I should say in the very beginning that there has never, ever been a single cannabis related fatality in terms of overdose. Nobody ever, no matter how hard they tried, has ever overdosed on this product. If somebody tells you you can do that, that's pretty much impossible. And I found an interesting study saying that there were not any significant lifetime mortality increases associated with cannabis use. So even though we're going to talk about some bad things very soon, oddly, in terms of the overall average life expectancy, it doesn't seem to have much of an impact. I also feel that it's fair to mention that using cannabis is terrible for children, for teens, for pregnant women, anything having to do with childhood development. It's very bad. There's all sorts of stuff that can happen, from low birth weight to health issues to more specifically lower IQ as an adult. Teenagers that smoke weed tend to be dumber as an adult, but adults that smoke weed and didn't do so as teenagers tend to be of normal intelligence. So smoking weed as a kid or teenager can definitely lower your IQ, which is not a good thing. So let's move into finally subject number one, physical side effects of marijuana that are bad for you. And the number one, most obvious one should be that smoking is bad for you. You're literally burning a plant. You're breathing hot gases and smoke and plant material and all sorts of stuff into your lungs, just like it's a forest fire. In the same way that smoking cigarettes is bad for you, smoking marijuana or cannabis, even if it's Delta 8 sprinkled on regular hemp or whatever, is equally bad for you. Now, what's interesting about this is a study just came out confirming that this is true. It's one of the first very few long-term cannabis studies on lungs, and it definitely damages lungs, but interestingly, it damaged them in a different way than tobacco. As the article states, it tends to lead to overinflated lungs, increased airway resistance, so difficulty sucking in, and impaired oxygen extraction. These are all things that I definitely don't want in my life, and I'm just generally not surprised, because at the end of the day, smoking hot gases has negative effects on you. Similarly, smoking vapes can also be bad. Now, a lot of the vapes that these products use are some kind of oil with the product in them, and when you smoke that in, you are getting hot oil and other chemicals in your lungs that probably don't need to be there. And as we've seen in recent years, tons of studies indicating that there are negative health side effects of vaping. They're less than cigarettes, they're not as bad as cigarettes, some of them are different than cigarettes, but vaping is going to be bad for you. Not as bad as smoking, but it's still going to be bad for you. And I think that's a very reasonable thing that most of you understand. You shouldn't be surprised by this. Let's move on to some things that are more interesting. Did you know that smoking or ingesting any cannabis product will raise your heart rate and blood pressure? That's like an objective, very well researched fact. Even if you're an experienced smoker, whatever, the moment that THC gets in your system, your heart rate is going to go up a little bit. It's not a massive doubling, it's a little minor pickup, less so than caffeine, but it does raise heart rate and blood pressure. On the internet, when I looked into all of this, it's advertised as being very bad for people that have COPD or any kind of circulatory or pulmonary issues, and say it could be fatal and blah, blah, blah. But to the best of my knowledge, and everywhere I researched and everything I looked at, nobody ever has died of a marijuana related heart attack, stroke, blood pressure problem, or anything like that. Even people that did have these pre-existing conditions. So whatever it doesn't seem to do it in a way that actually hurts people. A very personal one for me is that cannabis seems to lower testosterone, or at the very least, it seems to have some kind of effect on testosterone. So as many of you know, I have mysteriously low testosterone. When I learned this, one of the first things I did is sit down and read all the literature of it, some some of which you're seeing on the screen right now. And the initial testing that was done quite a ways back indicated that men who smoke marijuana have lower testosterone. There was another study that showed that men who smoke marijuana have higher testosterone, and then another study lower, higher, and it's kind of been a little bit all over the place. I'm not up to date on the most recent literature. So we will say whatever this product does, it does something to your endocrine system, and that is very consistent with what we know about cannabinoids in general. I did a whole video on those. Cannabinoids affect a whole ton of things in your body and your endocannabinoid system, and there's thousands of them and they interact uniquely, so we don't know exactly how they work, which is why I think this product should be legalized so we could actually research and know these things. That would be great. Personal side note on this one, even though that my endocrinologist said it was unnecessary, I completely discontinued all Delta 8 products for like 3 or 4 months to see if that had any effect on my personal testosterone, and it did not, none whatsoever. The next one is a very, very weird one that very few people have heard of. It's called cannabinoid hypermesis syndrome. A little bit of a mouthful right there, and we'll put the Wikipedia article on here. Basically, it's a very extreme stomach problem that you can get from cannabis. One of the things that cannabinoids does or stimulates is your gut. It can increase appetite, it can change your digestion a bit. It helps people that have celiacs or Crohn's disease. It's an appetite enhancer for people that are doing chemo, so it does things to your gut. We're not super sure about exactly what, but one of the ways that can go wrong is cannabinoid hypermesis syndrome, the symptoms of which are nausea, vomiting, extreme abdominal cramps, kidney failure, that's a scary one, electrolyte problems, and the internet says it can be fatal, which is a little, I mean, I suppose, yeah, I mean, kidney failure sounds kind of fatal, but going back to the beginning, nobody has ever died of this. And I think I may have experienced this once in my life. One time when I was in California, I had an edible and man, it just did not settle right. And I got some of the worst cramps in my life. It really sucked for like 2 hours and then it was gone. Never had that happen again, but I assume I got a little bit of the cannabinoid hypermesis, perhaps a very, very mild one. Now this is very rare. Very few people get this, like way, way, way less than 1% of smokers. And it also tends to be for people that smoke a lot, like all the time, very heavy doses. And if you are unfortunate enough to get this problem, one of the weird and simple ways that seems to help is a warm shower. A vast majority of people that have this problem say that warm showers help them a lot, and it's not really well understood why. One of the last physical dangers of marijuana is a danger to your waistline, and mine as well, because man, this, for me, it definitely is an appetite enhancer, and it makes me eat so much bad food. Just take a look at this clip. Guys, I think I just found a next level life hack. So Pop-Tarts are delicious, right? They're basically an entire food group unto themselves, but they tend to be a little bit dry. Cool Whip is basically air, and it's a little sweet and a little moist. So, you know, you dip your Pop-Tart in the Cool Whip, and then when you take a bite, you don't have to immediately follow up with milk. It like fixes the dryness issue. Really is an appetite enhancer, makes food taste better, more interesting, your inhibitions are lower. You do eat a lot. Can't say that I haven't gone through phases where I went too hard on this and I didn't watch myself and I just ate a ton of food and I got fat or chubbier and it just kind of happened, and that sucks. As an adult, I can control myself better now, but when I was new to this game, I had no self-control. So that is something that you do need to watch out for. Don't eat Taco Bell until you get a heart problem, a real heart problem. The next big section is let's talk about the mental side effects of this product. I think that this is the more interesting and probably more dangerous section as well. This is the one where you should really probably pay attention. I probably should have put this one first, but I just like to maintain the interest as we go along. Long-term high dose use of marijuana will make you dumb as hell. I don't think there's anybody on this planet that will argue that. If you've seen anybody who smokes dabs all day, who lives on edibles, they have dab brain, your IQ points go down. When you take this product, by and large, depending a little bit on your strain, your IQ points are going to go down while you're temporarily high. But if you do this all the time, it has some kind of effect on your brain that just seems to make you generally dumb. This is my personal observation, and I don't think that many of you that smoke or not are going to disagree with me. If I decided to just convert my life to hitting one big fat dab every 2 hours, this channel would go way downhill because my brain couldn't handle that. That's too much. People aren't supposed to have that. Typically, you only see that with really high dosage users. Lower doses, infrequent users, one-time users, it's not a problem. While you're temporarily high, you do have worse motor skills. You are are not a better athlete, you are not more coordinated, your reaction times are generally worse. This can lead to accidents. It's a mental effect, but you can trip and fall. Driving, big nightmare, lots of sports and stuff like that. Your motor skills are just bad, and there's no way to fix it, and no amount of concentration is going to make it better, so do be careful. In a similar way, this product will lower your inhibitions, much like alcohol. Perhaps that's a good thing. It makes you more sociable, more friendly, more fun. You can finally ask out the girl or boy of your dreams, but it can also make you do things like think it's okay to drive while high, or go swimming, or I'm going to work out on this product, or anything to do with firearms or fires, or the dozens of dangerous chemicals and electrical products that we live with every single day. It tends to lead to worse decision making, and people do occasionally hurt themselves or others while they're high simply because they're being dumb. Next up, let's talk about heightened senses. As you can see, these are getting a little bit worse as we go. A lot of times on this product, it can elevate your experience of any sensation, audio, visual, tactile on your hands, flavors we've already talked about, and it can really crank those up. Colors seem brighter, food tastes better, music is more interesting, and that's great up to a certain point, but then it can hit a point where it's all very overwhelming, where you can no longer look at something because it causes you anxiety or stress, or sounds sound louder or more menacing or more angry, where you can't get comfortable because you're hyper feeling your skin and you're touching everything. This is a relatively common thing that people do experience. I also experience this sometimes. The majority of the time this happens, I find it kind of fun. I like the overwhelming experience, but I've had it be very negative as well. When that happens, the smartest thing to do is just go to sleep, and when you wake up, it'll be gone, if that's possible. Hard to get comfortable like that, but it can be very, very stressful and anxiety driving for a lot of people. On that topic, smoking regular cannabis, and actually in my experience even more so with Delta 8, can cause short-term anxiety, and it can be very bad. I do know a number of people that every single time they smoke weed, they just get super anxious and they hate it, and all the stoners, me included, it's like, oh bro, you know, you gotta try this strain or that strain or whatever. But the reality is that some people's brains are just built a little differently, and by my personal, casual, non-scientific estimation, I would guess about 10% of people where this drug tends to cause anxiety more than anything fun. The reason this happens is because your brain gets overloaded with cannabinoids, not only the CBD but the THC, and it tends to overstimulate your amygdala, which is sort of an ancient primitive part of your brain that controls fear, which cranks up anxiety given that there's nothing really around you to be afraid of, right? Thankfully, this effect is temporary. It always goes away when it processes out of your system and you're not high anymore. My experience with cannabis-induced anxiety is more so on Delta 8, since that's kind of almost pure THC most of the time. I have found that it sucks, but if I wait it out, which is usually 30 minutes to an hour, I'll come back down and I'll get hit with like a nice little rush of euphoria, but it can be really, really bad sometimes. Some people absolutely hate this. It burns them up. It can lead to extreme behavior. So an example, a story of mine, a friend of mine tried cannabis for the first time while they were in Oregon or whatever, and instead of smoking anything, they just ate a whole brownie, like a whole medical brownie that would have been like 8 doses. So they got absurdly high, and they got this anxiety, and they kind of got scared, and for some reason thought that they needed to escape the cabin that they were in because the anxiety was so much, but they didn't want to go down the stairs, so they opened the window and jumped to a tree branch and went down the tree to the first story. And given what we already talked about with your inhibitions and motor skills, this is definitely not the thing you should be doing while on marijuana. They freaked out, they ran down to the lake and chilled for like 30 minutes, and it passed and it was fine. But people can do extreme, dumb, and dangerous things while they're feeling very extreme anxiety. Thankfully, the product doesn't seem to cause violence. Very rarely do you see somebody get so high that they want to fight, unlike alcohol, but it can make you put yourself in danger. Similarly, and this is a very scary one, this is one of the reasons I held out as long as I did. I never smoked a damn thing in my life until I was 27 years old. It can be a trigger for schizophrenia or psychosis. Some people are just naturally born predisposed to schizophrenia. Some people are born naturally predisposed to psychosis and a few other similar disorders. And for whatever reason, sometimes when people smoke marijuana, it really triggers that and puts them on a bad path. Now, for some people, this is only while they're on it. For some people, it just like gives them the push that they need to go down the slide all the way to Schizo Town. It's really, really rare. Only a tiny percentage of people does this happen to, but it does happen happen and it's real. So if you feel that your mental health is very poor, if you have a family history of like schizophrenia, psychosis, or something like that, maybe this is a product you should avoid. Maybe you don't try your odds on this one. Similarly, overuse can lead to depersonalization. That's something that not many people talk about. I actually had fans message me this after I made my last positive video on cannabis. When you use this way too much and get way too high all the time, you get depersonalized. And that's a word that not many people know. Basically, it feels like you're detached from your own body. You feel like an outside observer, like you're watching yourself, like you're a sim or a game character. You don't feel, you know your emotions, but you don't feel in control of them. It's a little, I think it's similar to ego death. Ego death is where your consciousness is almost entirely gone, but you feel removed, and it sort of gives you perspective on how much work your subconscious is doing, which can be very scary. It makes everything feel very dreamy and unreal, as I've read. This is not something that I have ever experienced, nor have I ever talked to an individual in person that experienced this, but I have had some fans that messaged me that said, you know, they overused pot for a long time and they ended up feeling kind of out of their own body, like they were just going through the motions and they could watch what was happening but not really control it. And the only way to fix this is to just stop. And sometimes you got to stop for like a long time, like years, for this to go back. So that's a very scary thing. That's something I think should be researched and looked at more, because nobody needs to live that way. Next up, let's talk about addiction. Now, this is a product that most of you know does not have a hard chemical addiction in the same way that heroin or amphetamines do, where your brain absolutely has to have it or terrible things happen to your brain and body. Cannabis is not like that. On a pure, like, scientific medical addictive scale, it ranks lower than coffee most of the time. However, there still is cannabis use disorder. People can get addicted to anything. People can be addicted to coffee, to sugar, to foot massages, pornography, whatever it is that you want to dream of. There's some subgroup of people that will go way too hard on it. Cannabis use disorder, according to a couple of websites I looked at, apparently affects around 10% of users, and it's sort of an emotional addiction and a little bit of physical one. We're going to talk about both parts really quick. The emotional addiction is something that anybody can go through. As a matter of fact, most addicts to most drugs are at least initially emotionally addicted to them. There's something wrong in their life that they try to supplement with this. It's a parental problem, it's a lack of friends, it's a lack of self-confidence, and they try to fix that with more and more and more of some drug, and it just leads down a horrible spiral. That can absolutely 100% happen with cannabis. It's easy to shift the blame and say, well, like that's your personal problem. And if it weren't for pot, it would be the same thing with alcohol or food or whatever the heck. And that's true, but there is a mental component to this. There is a small amount of physical addiction that I have to be very honest with, that if you smoke cannabis or use Delta 8 or THCO or THCV or any of these products very frequently, your brain gets used to that schedule. As a matter of fact, your brain will get used to almost any schedule you put it on, but it gets used to having that THC and extra cannabinoids. So when you stop, you do tend to be kind of grumpy. Having quit this cold turkey a couple of times, I found that it's not very extreme, at least not extreme at all compared to more traditional prescriptions that I've gotten, but it does happen. It also completely cocks up your sleep schedule. Since this drug tends to put people to sleep, as soon as they stop taking it, they have difficulty sleeping, which is very real. And then a big problem is that cannabis suppresses your dreams. If you use this product, odds are you're not going to dream very much. I think like 90+% of users have no dreams, which for me, since I have nightmares all the time, is just lovely. I don't know exactly why. When you discontinue and you're just like, yeah, I'm done with this, you're gonna have insane dreams for 2 to 3 months. It's like a dream backlog that your body just has to get out of you. It's just gonna hammer you with that constantly, which can even make it less pleasant to sleep. I said months, I meant weeks. The amount of time for this all to pass is roughly 2 to 3 weeks. You'll feel most of the effects going away in less than 1 week. So somebody who completely discontinues marijuana, on the high end, after 3 weeks, they're not likely to feel grumpy, they're not likely to crave it, they're not likely to have crazy dreams or a bad sleep schedule. The only thing that takes longer than that is depersonalization, which is quite the extreme problem to have. Whew, that was a lot. We're moving into our final section today about the dangers of marijuana, and that is street weed. Buying things on the street has a totally different set of safety problems versus buying something in a store in California, Oklahoma, Colorado, something like that, right? So first of all, in actually every state, buying street weed is a felony in most cases. Even in legal states, you're required to buy through a dispensary in a certain process with a card or whatever. So pretty much anywhere you go in the US and anywhere you go in the world, buying this product product outside of legal venues is gonna be a felony. And as a responsible YouTuber, I will encourage you not to commit felonies. I don't know what problems you have in your life, but adding felonies on top of that is not going to make it any more fun. So if you live in a place like Texas, you should really consider alternatives like Delta 8 and THCV or something like that that's more legal. Don't get in jail because of me or any other stupid YouTuber. Now onto more real practical problems. You can buy products that are laced with something. This is very unlikely. To the best of my knowledge, this doesn't happen often. I've never met an individual in my life that has told me that they've experienced this, but I have read stories about it online. According to American Addiction Centers, which is going to be very anti-drug, they said it can be laced with glass to kill people, lead or heavy metals, PCP, heroin, embalming fluid, laundry detergent, that's a weird one, LSD, amphetamines, ketamines, cocaine. And the general story that you see from most of these is that whatever dealer doesn't like selling pot because it doesn't make enough money, so they get their people hooked on other harder stuff by putting it in the weed. Be careful with that if you're buying street weed. And again, advice number one, just generally don't do that. In the same kind of vein, you could be smoking pesticides, you could be smoking fertilizers, you could be smoking heavy metals that help plants grow or something like that. A lot of people put stuff on their plants to just make them bigger and more buddlier, but that could kill you if you smoke it, or at least cause some kind of long-term health effects. I kind of think about this as just going to like the nursery where all the different fertilizers and pesticides are, looking at those bottles, reading the warnings, and wondering if they're things that I should grind up and smoke, and the answer is, well, absolutely not. Then finally, you can buy weed that is moldy. All sorts of different molds grow on this product. You do not want to smoke mold if you value your lungs. Most of you know about black mold and how it's bad. These can be worse. You can get spores in you that can replicate in your body. You can get it in your nose and your sinus and all these kind of things. So if your buds are looking a little bit moldy, you should probably just throw them away. And this is true in legal states as well. I have seen some legal states where less reputable dispensaries try to sell you some real crapola really cheap. Don't smoke mold, guys. That can that can pretty much ruin your life, so don't do that. Somehow, after about 25 minutes of talking, we've actually covered most of the dangers of marijuana. I do want to add a TLDR summary at the end here and offer my general opinions on it. As you can see, cannabis does a lot of stuff to your body, like a lot of stuff. And truly, genuinely speaking, I know that it does more than I know. There's a lot of unknown unknowns when it comes to cannabinoids and cannabinoid research because it's been illegal for like 100 years. So we don't know all the details of what it does to your body, but it definitely does things. Similarly, it does a variety of things for your brain, both good and bad. Personally, I believe it does more good than bad for the majority of people. Of course, there's some minority, some percentage of people that this product just isn't going to work for based on their biology or their brain or their how their liver processes things or whatever. But for the majority of people, it seems to help them more than hurt. The majority of the people that it hurts in a pretty minor, temporary kind of way. Very rarely do you run into real big complications with cannabis. If you're taking other meds, you should definitely look up contraindications because it's probably one of the least interacting drugs on the planet, but there are some drugs that it interacts with that could be quite bad. Most of the really bad things like the hypermesis or the depersonalization or the people that get really bad anxiety and hurt themselves, it's exceedingly rare to the point where the vast majority of this I've really only seen in online stories and experienced very little in person. So the odds of you putting this product in your body and just something horrible happening are like lightning strike or bear attack kind of rare. It's comforting to know that nobody has ever died from cannabis, because I promise you, if you do get too high and that anxiety hits, you might sit there and think that you're dying, but that has never happened, thank goodness. And then finally, my last bit of advice. I like this product. I use it all the time. You see the videos on the channel or whatever. Don't listen to YouTubers. I am not a doctor. I didn't research this. I read scholarly articles online, blah, blah, blah. I've got my personal stories, blah, blah, blah. I'm not a doctor. I don't know this subject as well as your doctor. If you have questions about this, if this is interesting to you, talk to your doctor and read things online. Go read some stuff from like Leafly that's very positive, and then read some stuff from the CDC or American Addiction Centers that's very negative. Get a little bit of balanced information and talk to a real, actual, qualified doctor like an adult, and don't listen to YouTubers on the internet, not even me. I hope that you have learned something from this video. I hope it was fun to watch. If it was, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. And I should be going to work on the next project pretty soon, which is a two-parter about NFTs and gaming, and it's gonna be savage. Drifter out.